Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, and it is once again time for a tank review. This time we're taking a look at the brand new premium Tier 8 German tank destroyer. I'll have a stab at pronouncing the name of the thing, although I'm probably going to mangle it horribly. It's not fair. I can say the Jagdpanzer part, it's just the first bit, the KanonenJagdpanzer. It's the KanonenPanzer. That's what I'm going to call it for the duration of this review, because it's easy, and I'm English, and I'm lazy. I'm also going to try something new in this review, purely and simply because YouTube is still screwing up the frame rate of any video I upload that has a file size of greater than 1 GB. So this particular video review is going to be split into chapters in order to try to keep the file size down and therefore the frame rate nice and smooth, and we'll see how that works out once YouTube's finished processing it. So in this first section of the video review, we're going to be taking a look at the machine in the garage and comparing it to its competitors at Tier 8. What is one of these things going to cost you? Well, currently in the EU Premium gift shop, one of these things will set you back €49.99 or £36.39. This is something that Wargaming are doing increasingly often of late. You never seem to be able to buy just the tank that you want, or the warship that you want if you're playing World of Warships. Instead, they come bundled with a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily want or need. Obviously, they all come with a free garage slot. In this case, 30 days of premium and 1,750 gold. Obviously, this allows Wargaming to bump the price up, but it's been upsetting a lot of people because not everybody wants 30 days of premium. Not everybody wants 1,750 gold. As you can see, I certainly don't need it, but if I want to get the KanonenPanzer, then I have to fork out for the extras. So the question on everybody's lips is a KanonenPanzer and 30 days of premium and a garage slot and 1,750 gold worth the asking price of just a fraction under €50? Let's find out. Initial impressions are that the KanonenPanzer is very, very similar to the E25, which has obviously been removed from sale. There are a couple of significant differences, although the similarities are obvious. They're both very, very low profile machines, they're very, very stealthy. They're very, very quick and manoeuvrable. Their armour is absolutely terrible. And they both have quite punchy guns. Although in the case of the E25, it wasn't so much about the damage and penetration of the gun as just the raw blistering rate of fire, which was absolutely phenomenal. You definitely don't get a monster rate of fire on the KanonenPanzer. This has a 90mm gun, whereas the E25 had a 75mm gun. In fact, the same 75mm gun that you got at Tier 5 on the Stuck 3, which is why the E25 got such an amazing rate of fire out of that gun. Kind of in the same way that the Jagdtiger 88 got a ridiculous rate of fire with its long 88mm gun. Of course, the E25 and the Jagdtiger 88 are no longer available for sale, but the biggest difference between those two machines and the KanonenPanzer here is they got premium matchmaking and this one doesn't. The E25 as a Tier 7 machine would only ever get into Tier 8 matches at the very most. So while on paper the 75mm gun on the E25 looked distinctly underwhelming since it only had 150mm of penetration, it had the rate of fire and the accuracy of 0.30 to hit the weak spots of any Tier 7 or 8 heavy tanks that it might have to fight. The Jagdtiger 88 was in a similar position. It was still using the Pak 43 88mm gun that you get on the Tiger down at Tier 7, but it would only ever have to fight Tier 9 machines, and with 0.31 accuracy and one of the most ridiculous rates of fire of any machine in World of Tanks, it was entirely capable of looking after itself. That's not necessarily something you can say about the KanonenPanzer here. The gun, while it's a 90mm gun and not an 88mm gun, is very, very similar to the gun on the Jagdtiger 88. It has a little bit more penetration, and it's marginally less accurate, but it is still very accurate. Unfortunately, the KanonenPanzer has to fight Tier 10s. Premium matchmaking is a thing of the past. So let's just take a look at the stats of this machine, and then we'll compare it to other Tier 8 tank destroyers, and other premium tank destroyers, not necessarily Tier 8, and we'll show you exactly what it is that makes this thing tick. For a start, the armour is absolutely abysmal, but then again, the armour was absolutely abysmal on the E25, and nobody's trying to claim that the E25 was underpowered because it didn't have any armour. This thing actually has less armour than the E25. The E25 had 50mm of armour at the front. The KanonenPanzer only has 30. Now you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, big deal, 50mm of armour is still terrible. Well, yes, it is. However, it's quite a significant number because of overmatching. Also, the E-25's armour was better sloped at the front and the sides than the KanonenPanzer. With 50mm of armour, in order to completely overmatch the armour of your tank, you have to be firing a 151mm or better gun at the E-25, which meant that you could get some spectacular bouncers off the E-25 if, for example, you were reversing back over a hill and somebody struck your upper glacis. It was not unusual, although you shouldn't count on it, but it wasn't unusual to see shots bounce off the E-25 in the most hilarious fashion. That isn't going to happen with the KanonenPanzer, not with 30mm of frontal armour. So, okay, the armour is garbage, but nobody really expected this thing to be as well armoured as the Jagdtiger. Speed and manoeuvrability is the forte of the KanonenPanzer, not armour. So what's the speed and manoeuvrability actually like? Well, it's pretty impressive. This thing has a top speed of 70 km per hour, which is 5 km per hour faster, believe it or not, than the E-25. Unfortunately, the power to weight ratio, while it's not bad, it isn't really quite there. The E-25 had a 700 horsepower engine and weighed about the same as the KanonenPanzer. It had a power to weight ratio of over 26 horsepower per ton, which is phenomenally good. The KanonenPanzer only has a 500 horsepower engine, which means that its power to weight ratio, while not bad, and I really must stress this, it's not a bad power to weight ratio, it's nowhere near as good as that of the E-25, clocking in at just under 20 horsepower per ton. As far as raw manoeuvrability is concerned, it's actually very, very good indeed. It has a 46 degree per second hull traverse, which is fantastic. And take that into consideration with the fantastic firing arc of this 90mm gun as well. You can cover a very, very wide arc at the front of the machine with the gun without having to turn the hull of the tank. And that is a significant problem on French tank destroyers in particular, because they tend to have a very, very narrow firing arc in combination with very long aiming time. In a French tank destroyer, you're constantly having to turn the hull of the tank and then go through the whole long aiming cycle again in order to get the gun pointed at and fired at whatever you're shooting at. That is not a problem that you're going to suffer in the KanonenPanzer. All of which brings us rather neatly onto the 90mm Rheinmetall DM1 gun, and at the end of the day, this is a tank destroyer, so the gun had better be good. Unfortunately, well, it's not bad, but it's just a little underwhelming. 9.52 rounds per minute rate of fire, 212 average penetration, 250 with premium high explosive anti-tank ammunition, 240 average damage, 0.32 accuracy, which is very good, and a 2-second aiming time, which is also pretty good. You can see some distinct similarities here between guns like the German Pak 4388, which has exactly the same damage and comparable penetration, aiming time and accuracy, and guns like the 20-pounder on the British AT-15. Very, very similar statistics across the board, except for that rate of fire, and that's what lets the KanonenPanzer down. This machine produces, at best, a sustained damage per minute output of 2,286. That's just not very good. It's better than the DPM of a Tier 8 heavy tank, but it should be. This is a tank destroyer. Compared to the other Tier 8 tank destroyers, this is the runt of the litter. The British AT-15, with its 20-pounder gun, manages a damage per minute of in excess of 2,700. The Soviet Su-101, over 2,800. How about the infamous BL-10 on the ISU-152? Well, it not just beats it in penetration and alpha damage, it also beats it in damage per minute, managing 2,500 or more damage per minute, even though it only has a third of the rate of fire. 2,600 damage with the 120mm AT gun on the T-28. The same gun on the T-28 prototype, which produces a slower rate of fire because the T-28 prototype has the advantage of having a turret, still manages to beat the KanonenPanzer on DPM. The Rheinmetall Borsig with the 128mm gun. Bigger gun, more penetration, bigger damage up front, and better sustained DPM, over 2,500. Even the venerable Ferdinand with half the rate of fire still manages 150 more damage per minute than the KanonenPanzer with its 128mm gun. Actually, quite embarrassingly, with the stock 88mm gun, it also manages better damage per minute. But where things start to get really embarrassing is when you compare this gun to the guns on other premium tank destroyers. Of course, there is only one premium Tier 8 tank destroyer to compare it to, and it's German. It's the Jagdtiger 88. Now, you can't buy it anymore, but that doesn't mean it's gone away. You're still going to see these things on the battlefield, and the Jagdtiger 88 gets 2,667 damage per minute. Of course, that means we've now run out of premium Tier 8 tank destroyers with which to compare the KanonenPanzer, so we're just going to have to compare it to the Tier 7 premiums, but don't worry, it still looks bad, even compared to these. The E25, 2,700 damage per minute. Like the Jagdtiger 88, you can't buy it anymore, but like the Jagdtiger 88, hasn't gone away. And you can say exactly the same thing about the SU-12244, also at Tier 7, which is also still around even though you can't buy it and manages 2,925 DPM. Okay, Jingles, but machines like this, the SU-12244, the E25, the Jagdtiger 88, they were taken away for a reason, and it wasn't just because of the premium matchmaking, they also had absurdly good damage per minute. Fair enough. What about the ISU-122S? This is a brand new premium tank destroyer, Tier 7. It does not get premium matchmaking, but it does manage to do over 3,000 damage per minute. Hell, it almost does 3,200. So you're probably beginning to get the picture by now. Where does that leave the KanonenPanzer? Well, it doesn't have the penetration or the knockout punch of the tank destroyers with the big guns, and it doesn't have the DPM of the tank destroyers with the little guns, or any of the other guns for that matter. But there's only so much theory crafting you can do. At the end of the day, it's more down to the skill of the person driving the machine than any characteristics of the machine itself, although you have to agree that characteristics help. So what we're going to do now, right after the break, is we're going to take this thing out into random battles, strap our man pants on, and see what we can do with it. I hope you'll join me in the next video.